Bonjour et bienvenue au Théâtre National de la Presse. We have with us today the Garth Turner MP from Halton, independent MP from Halton. Mr. Turner will start by a brief statement followed by periodic questions, so I'll remind everybody to turn off their cell phone, Blackberries, and other noisy gadgets. So, Mr. Turner, the floor is yours.
All right, well, thank you very much for the interest. There's been speculation that I today will announce my intent to join a political party that starts with G. That is not the case. I'm here to talk about something that I consider more substantive, as it affects many more people than just one homeless member of Parliament. Now, I have a statement to make, and then I have an announcement. Sadly, I believe that the voice of the people is being quelled right now, and I'm not going to let that happen without speaking up. I realize full well this probably will not help my situation. But the last time I was here, as you may remember, was on the day of my ouster from the Conservative caucus. That event raised a number of questions. Now, these are not just about my situation, but about every MP, every riding association, all parties, the political masters, and all Canadians who get involved in the grassroots process. The people who selected me as the Conservative candidate in Halton sent along 10 questions that they had after that event took place. Among those questions, what was the reason the MP was booted out, and where's the evidence? Second, what is the MP's status as being a candidate in the next election? Number 3, what happens if the people in the riding nominate that candidate again? Who decides who represents the people? Will it be the people, or will it be the party bosses? Well, now we have some answers. Actually, 3 letters were sent to me, and these 3 letters were received simultaneously on Friday afternoon. I have copies of them, and I'll distribute them to you in a minute. Here's what the leader of the Conservative Party, its top officials, and the National Caucus Chair have determined. Number 1, I have been disqualified as a party candidate in the next election. Although I'm a card-carrying member of the party, I will not be allowed to run. Number 2, the decision came in a closed meeting by the party's National Council, and no reason was given. Number 3, the national president of the party says I will not be permitted to seek the Conservative nomination or a Conservative nomination again. Number 4, my suspension from caucus is indefinite, and no reason will be given for it, and no evidence will be provided to my electors. Number 5, National Caucus Chair Rahim Jaffer tells my local riding that all of these matters are internal. So let me summarize. The party's removed an MP nominated by the local party members and elected by the voters. The party will not explain to people why this has happened. The candidate they selected for the next election has been set aside, no explanation. And all of this has happened in secret without any input or appeal, and yet it materially affects the voters, of course, in a large electoral district. So this raises more questions about the role of the average Canadian in the political process and their ability to choose their own representatives. And about the government's commitment, of course, to openness, transparency, and accountability in the political system. So Canada's new government is suddenly looking a lot like the old ones. Controlling power in Ottawa, well, it makes both voters and members of Parliament less relevant. But this is not just about the Conservative Party. Sadly, they all work in the same way. And therefore, I would like to serve notice today of the following actions. Number 1, I'm resigning my membership in the Conservative Party. This is not easy for me to do. After being a member of Parliament twice, after being a Conservative cabinet minister, after having been a leadership contender for the Progressive Conservative Party, and after having been a Conservative, a Tory, for my entire life. But I want my party to believe in free speech, diversity of opinion, cooperation, equality of all people, progressive social values, true environmental protection, and stand against intolerance, bigotry, and exclusion. More importantly, though, I have come to realize in the last number of weeks that party politics, and not just specifically this party, is the problem. So number 2, Second, in the House of Commons, I will support this government only when its actions are consistent with the values that I've just articulated. I may only have one vote. I may not be able to change a whole lot, but it matters to me, and I'm going to make that vote count, and you'll know about it. Thirdly, I will seek out expert legal opinion on how our big national parties can be forced to be more democratic, to actually listen and obey their own members. Right now, these parties operate as old boys clubs, accountable only to themselves. And is it any wonder, in that case, why voter turnout has been going down and why cynicism has been rising? Fourth, I will introduce a private member's bill into the House seeking equal treatment in the House of Commons and under the Canada Elections Act for independent members of Parliament. They should be able to sit on committees and to raise money and issue tax receipts the same as every other member of Parliament in the House. This is an essential reform. Fifth, I'm not going away. Over the coming months, I will travel anywhere that people want to talk about democratic renewal, parliamentary reform, the role of our MPs, and how citizens can get more involved to reclaim the system from the unrepentant, arrogant party bosses and the unelected backroom boys. I invite Canadians everywhere to get involved because we have to break this tedious cycle of electing politicians who sell us on change and deliver same old, same old. The events of the past few weeks have shown me it is time to remove this filter of parties between people and Parliament. So you may say, well, fine, but what can one person do? You're only an independent. You're one guy. What can you do? Well, in the past 3 weeks as an independent, I've actually been able to pose 5 questions in the House of Commons. I played a role in helping to extend income splitting to 2 million retired Canadians. I've actually had more influence as an independent in the last 3 weeks than I had as 9 months being a party backbencher. In addition, every day I talk to tens of thousands of Canadians online, and I built a database of tens of thousands of people, of more people who are disaffected with the party system, who feel they can never have their voice heard, they can never get through the party filter. I think this is the future, and I'm committed to making it happen for all Canadians. And I don't want to go back to supporting party politics as it's always been, controlling ideas and controlling Parliament. So this is not about bashing Stephen Harper. This is not about bashing the Conservative Party. It's trying to be constructive and find a better way ahead. Maybe, you know what, maybe we need 5 or 10 or 20 more independents in this House of Commons. Enough to break the party stronghold, enough to give the people what they want, which is free votes, free thought, and a better political system. So I think it's time we think twice about electing people who promise what they cannot deliver. And I think at least it's worth talking about. A few minutes ago, a new discussion forum went live where people can talk about these promises we can keep to each other. It's called promisekeepers.ca, and I'm hoping a lot of Canadians will go there and start this discussion about how we can take politics back from the party system. So the issue here is about democracy. It's about the relevance of the voters. It's about how we're represented and how the big and powerful political parties operate. How can voters think they matter when members of Parliament don't? My own experience over the last few weeks has proven that dissension is unwelcome, and that the poobahs of the parties of all colours have made themselves actually more important than the individual voters and electors in Canada. If we can let what happened to me as one MP, and I'm not complaining, but if it happens to one MP, it can happen to many of them. They can lose their voice, it can be taken away. This should not happen. 700 members of the Conservative Party in Halton nominated me as their guy. They nominated me twice. Last time was 8 weeks ago. And yet a few party officials accountable to no one and meeting in secret can take away their voice. How is that democratic? At the same time, we have the governing party that took an MP elected by a majority of the people as a Liberal in Vancouver and made him part of the government. That makes you wonder. Makes me wonder. So the fight is not to get me back into the Conservative caucus. Forget it. That's done. The true fight is for democratic principle. Either we have a bottom-up system that works where people feel they actually matter, or we don't. So people may end up sending MPs to Ottawa who are party supporters through and through. Or they may end up sending people who, like me, are a pain in the ass. But regardless, the people sent them. And unless the MP ends up voting against a budget or calling for the resignation of the leader, they should be able to stay as they were elected and serve the term the people wanted. So, these party brass need to be reminded that they're not a quick and dirty substitute for the people. Finally, my situation and the party responses I've received will never change this reality. Blogging and what it represents in terms of openness in politics is not going away. The genie is out of the bottle. Digital democracy is here to stay, and the party bosses had better get used to it. Political elites who maintain a fortress mentality and deny people more involvement, especially using the new technologies, they will fail. So that's why I'm here this afternoon. I hope this is a sunrise of new political accountability for Canadians, and not just the sunset on my own time in federal politics. Finally, you may wonder what I'm doing. Tonight, an independent electoral district board is forming in my riding, made up largely of former Conservative board members. I will stay an independent member of Parliament, certainly for the foreseeable future. I will be running in the next election. Count on that. And by the way, any donations for my 2007 election campaign are now being accepted at my new election website, garthturner.com. Now, over the next little while, I will be actively pursuing other initiatives. Income splitting for families. I have agricultural summits planned, 2 of them in Ontario in the coming months. I'll be having other PMBs on taxation and parliamentary reform, certainly budgetary input. And I will be campaigning tomorrow in London, Ontario for Elizabeth May. Elizabeth May should be the first Green Member of Parliament in the House of Commons. We need that voice in the House of Commons. We need that perspective. We need that experience. We need that strong environmental input in Parliament. And she is the appropriate person to be the first Green MP. And as an independent Member of Parliament, I'm now in a position to support those candidates of whatever political party and whatever background that I think are appropriate for our country. Thank you very much. Which I have copies of, if you're interested in the letters that were received from party officials.
And we're now going to go to questions. I'm going to take one question, one follow-up per journalist. And we're going to start with Julie Van Dusen, CBC.
Mr. Turner, you've got a lot of thoughts here, so I'm just trying to figure out what your key point is. Maybe just answer the question, what would have to happen for it not to be the old boys club that you say it is?
It's as I tried to explain, it's sort of a multi-pronged thing. We need to try and explore legal avenues to see what rules can be brought to bear by, for example, a party riding association who has had a member removed. Do they have any legal rights? Right now they're being told they have no legal rights. That does not seem to be democratic and fair. So the first way to deal with that would be to see under the Constitution, and if not under the Constitution, some other aspect of law, parliamentary law, privilege, or convention, whether they would have recourse. That's number one. Number two, we need to try and get people elected into positions of power and authority in parties who understand that their parties exist because of grassroots populism and the support of the independents. Sadly, we've lost that. And we've had parties here in Ottawa have had a legacy of grassroots populism, and I can't see it anywhere today. So those are the two major thrusts that need to happen. And thirdly, the Private Members Bill, we need to change the Canada Elections Act so it doesn't discriminate against independent members of Parliament. I can't accept a donation from you, Julie, and issue a tax receipt right now. I'm not allowed to do it. Whereas if I were a Conservative Member of Parliament sitting here, I could, or a Liberal or a New Democrat. That is wrong, and that needs to change if we're ever going to have more independence in the political system. So those are the actions we need to see.
Any follow-up, Julie?
I guess just, are you suggesting kind of like a free-for-all? And you say the party politics doesn't work anymore, so basically, how do you expect government to work? Because that's what happens. Parties get elected. People belong to parties, and they have to have solidarity.
There is, of course, there's a role for parties. Absolutely, and I'm not suggesting that. We cannot function with 308 independents. I do think we need 5 or 10 or 20 more independents in the House of Commons to have a bit of the balance of power and to make parties all more accountable to another force within Parliament. I think that's very important and essential right now. But parties certainly themselves can open up things and be much more democratic. The episode I've gone through, not that I'm angry or bitter, but it's educational to me. The fact that a member of Parliament can be removed and the people who sent that person to Ottawa can effectively lose the kind of person they thought they were sending to Ottawa, and there's no recourse. None. There's no appeal process. There's nothing that can happen. That clearly is not right, and it's clearly not democratic. So maybe I don't have all the answers. But, we got to start this conversation to figure out how this is not going to happen again, because it's not good for all of us. I don't know who benefits from this.
You're from CTV. I don't know your name. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. You hinted that earlier that if Canadians spent an hour with these guys like I have, they wouldn't recognize this party. Gone are the days of Preston Manning's grassroots. What were you referring to?
Not sure I exactly recall having said that. You read it in a blog.
Those darn things.
Yeah. I'm not exactly sure what that refers to.
What does it say about Mr. Harper as a leader, what you've been through?
Well, I think it probably says that the entire leadership structure of parties has become extremely remote from the grassroots. And I think you have to, in my particular situation, I have to lump in the people who wrote those letters to me, the national president, the executive director, the national caucus chair, and one would assume, by extension, the leader of the party. So I think it says that they're quite a bit out of touch with a lot of Canadians. And I'm definitely seeing that in terms of my online experience, where I've had tens of thousands of people who are feeling disaffected. People who are tired of political system where they can elect a party promising one thing and they get another in a few months. And they seem to have no recourse, not even through their own party, to go back into the governing party to have their voice heard. That's frustrating for people.
Susan Bonner, CBC.
How do you propose that these 5, 10, 15, 20 independent MPs magically appear in this Canadian Parliament of ours under the system that we have?
They don't magically appear, and it's going to take a little while. It's just going to take some time. People obviously have to have the courage to think they can actually get elected as independents, and that is the #1 stumbling block, where most people believe that if they left their party, they would not be able to be elected. I think there is enough of a current within Canadian society today. I think there's a disaffection with the old line parties. I think many more people, if they tried it, I think it's worth the exercise. Being a member of Parliament is not just about getting re-elected. It has to be more. It has to be trying to make a contribution in the House of Commons. And right now we've got a lot of people who really are there to get elected again. And parties are there to consolidate power. I understand that completely. I know that. I've been part of that system for a long period of time. But I hope the fact that I have not been killed yet will inspire maybe some other people to say, you know what? Turner actually is able to get up in question period and ask a question. He's actually been able to influence some policy more than I have sitting on the back bench in my party in caucus. So I think it's hopefully some leading by example, I hope, will inspire a few others to do this.
Would you be willing to put your money where your mouth is and help people or start a movement that would help people?
Yeah, actually I am, and that's why I'm trying to do, let's first try and get Canadians involved. I'm trying to open up a discussion online to get lots of people coming to do this, show support for individuals in their own constituencies. Maybe there are good members of Parliament right now that people really would like to have represent them in a non-partisan and independent way. Of course, siding with the government when the government deserves support, and opposing it when it doesn't.
So, sorry, are you asking someone to leave their party?
Why not? I'm lonely.
Brian Lilly.
Mr. Turner, you, in selling this to the digital world, you talked about disturbing news over the weekend. for anybody that's come within 10 feet of Canadian politics, there's nothing new in the letters that you sent forward, I would argue, and you talked about the removal of MPs. Well, you're still here, and you say that you've had more success in the last few weeks than is 9 months. So my question is, isn't this just more of the same, of the Tories saying we still don't like you, we still don't want to eat lunch with you, than it is of any big disturbing news of how Canadian politics operates?
Well, I think if you were to go and sit around the table of the 30 people in my riding association and sort of talk to them after this happened, you would see how disturbing it was. There are Canadians who feel that they nominated somebody, sent them to Ottawa, that they're there for a particular reason to represent a brand as well as themselves. And all of a sudden the situation changes and they have no recourse. They have no ability to change anything. And yet they are the ones, they feel, you know what, we were the guys who went and found a candidate, selected the candidate, sent the candidate on, and yet my candidate has been denied being able to carry the brand or carry those colors. That is shocking to a lot of people who are grassroots militants in the party. I truly believe it is.
Would you prefer to see an American or British style where you've got people like George Galloway still running around as Labour MPs denouncing the leader, or Republicans that never vote with their party? That's the thing you want.
I think there's a compromise, obviously, between our system and the American or the British system. I do think we need to have members of Parliament who are more independent, who are perhaps more unpredictable, who are siding with issues that they believe are important to their district rather than with the government every time. I mean, we all know that in the House of Commons right now, it's theatre. House of Commons does not matter that much, and those of you, you know it, you cover it every day. Votes come along, members of Parliament have pieces of paper on their desks instructing them how to vote. And that's how they vote. Lots of members of Parliament have no idea what they're voting on. Now, I'm not criticizing them, it's the way the system works. And I would love to see people polling those in their district to find out what people actually think about voting on a private member's bill or a piece of government legislation. Do we still need confidence measures? Absolutely. Do we still need parties to run the country? Of course we do. But we need more independence in Parliament, and we need MPs who are able to pick and choose the issues they want to decide upon. Today, that's been removed from them, sadly.
Norma Greenaway.
Mr. Turner, do you have any MPs that are willing to join your mini wave of independence here? Are we starting a party of independence?
Well, no. We do not need another party. Okay, that's not what I'm saying. Have I had discussions with some other MPs? Yes, I have.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see.
What's so different about now than 5 years from now or 10 years from now that people have been booted out of parties before, caucus? People have been told how to vote before. There is such a thing as party discipline, and there have been a few more free votes of anything in the last few years. So what's so different that's got you so irate?
Well, I'm not irate. I'm hopeful. What's different right now? Well, actually, we haven't had a free vote since we had this Parliament convene. Okay, so it's been 9 months and no free vote. Not on a substantive issue, not on a substantive bill. We have had, yes, we've had MPs booted out in the past, but you know what? Maybe this is just a movement or a reform that we've all talked about, but we've never actually done anything about. We have a Minister of Democratic Renewal, I hear, but I don't know what we're doing about it. And many provinces have ministers of democratic renewal as well, and I don't know what they're doing about it. We still don't have free votes. We still have whipped situations in Parliament. We still have absolute control of what MPs say and do. We have the ban on talking to the media from government MPs. We have a number of situations today which I don't think are helpful at all for democracy. So I just think maybe it's time we changed it. And maybe the fact that we've got this internet, this digital democracy, maybe now, you know, hundreds of thousands of people can go on their computer and actually become part of something, the same as going out to the church hall and joining a political party. Maybe this becomes a surrogate for the political system that was born in the 18th and 19th century that controls us today. And I do think we have a friction right now between that and the 21st century digital communications and the way that politics maybe should work in the future. Why not? It's worth a shot.
David Lundgren, Reuters.
The Tory party, you are going back. You're going to campaign for Elizabeth May. You say the Green Party needs its first MP in the House soon. Well, why don't you just change parties now and become that first MP for the Greens?
She should be the first MP.
Why?
Because she's a leader. Because I would be a Johnny-come-lately Green MP. And she obviously has dedicated her whole life to that particular philosophy. She's campaigning in a by-election. Good on her.
Strong in the Green Party philosophy, doesn't it help the party to have someone in the House now to be able to say vote Green as opposed to...
Clearly it would. Obviously it would, which is why Elizabeth and the Greens have clearly been, wooing me with their considerable charms. But I do believe it is appropriate for Elizabeth to be the first Green MP, and therefore I'm going to try and help her a bit to see if she can achieve that. I think it just makes sense.
Yvan Cloutier, Radio-Canada.
There is another independent MP right now, Mr. Arthur. From
Mr. Arthur, yes. Have I spoken with Andre? Absolutely, he's a great guy.
Do you want him to get involved with you into this?
We've already chatted a little about that. I'm not sure what his intentions are, but I like him. He has obviously a clearly independent streak. I really admire anybody who can get elected and spend $942. That's amazing. So Andre is a very fine member of Parliament, and I will continue my discussions with him.
Richard Leroux.
You held up a sign, something that said "Promises Kept," I believe.
Promisekeeper.ca, correct?
Well,
yeah.
that's Promise Keepers.
Or promise kept.
Promisekept.ca. Big difference, I think.
Say again?
You want to clarify that? I think Promise Keepers.
Just a website. I'd like people to anyone who's interested in trying to create a system where people are trying to make and keep promises as opposed to electing people who make promises and break them. Let's just try and get together in a particular online discussion forum, try and come together and see if people can advance some of these ideas we've talked about today.
This is not linked to Promise Keepers.
It is not, my friend. No.
Okay.
Very far from it.
Roméo Saint-Martin, Politics Watch.
Mr. Turner, you seem to go against your leader with David Emerson crossing, and also post then you've been complaining about the income trust decision. How many people in the Conservative caucus share your opinions on that, are part of this ban of talking to the media and voicing their opinions, something you seem to want to have MPs freely discuss about?
Well, question, have I heard from other members of Parliament who have expressed support for my position in members of the Conservative caucus? Yes, I have. How many? A few.
More than a handful?
More than a handful. But I've had discussions with them in private, obviously, because, there's a lot of control. The parties are very, very controlling. And it is intimidating for a lot of people to speak out. And I understand that completely. It's a very difficult situation in which to operate, and it's difficult to speak out. I'm the poster boy for that. But there are a considerable number of people who are frustrated.
Why don't they speak out? Are they afraid of having what happened to you happen to them, or do they just want to go along and get along?
Well, I'm a good example, aren't I?
What do they tell you?
I think I think obviously, as I said before, there's a lot of people who believe if they were to become an independent, they will not be reelected. And that's a very large concern for a lot of them. And also, I'm sitting way up in the back row in the opposition side, and there's sort of some visible symbols of my being apart from the others. And as you put it, they don't eat lunch with me anymore. So there are, disincentives built into the system for people to do that. I hope a few people can get over those, because I believe at the end of the day our system really needs this, and I think we really, really do need to have some control on big party policies.
Alex Panetta, CP.
Have you gotten any indication whatsoever from any other MPs that they might be tempted to become independents like yourself?
The answer is yes, I have.
How many are we talking?
I think there may be a couple of people who are reasonably close. I don't know. They have to make up their own mind, and it's a complicated decision for them. Have I talked with some other members of Parliament? Yeah, absolutely, I have talked with them. Have I sensed among members of a few parties that they are frustrated by their own party control upon them? Absolutely, yes.
These people are not just Conservatives? They're
no, not just Conservatives.
Lina Dib, NTR.
Yeah, you said just before that you feel that you have more power now. You were in that caucus, and how much input do backbenchers, conservative backbenchers have into government policy? None at all, or how much?
I don't know. I hate to break caucus confidentiality, as you all know. It is a frustrating experience for caucus members to try and have input into substantive government policy. It is very frustrating. There are not wide-ranging policy debates that I have experienced. Policy is formulated among the leadership echelons of the party and presented to the membership. So it's a frustrating situation.
Okay. And there's nothing holding you back now from giving names. You're not part of that caucus anymore. So what stops you from telling us so-and-so is fed up, he wants to get out, and so and so and so? Why don't you just do it?
Individual members will have to make up their own minds. It's a very complicated decision. If you're the MP for a certain district in Canada, you have your electors to worry about. You've got how many people in your riding voted for you as a Conservative or a Liberal, how many for you as an individual, and how many for other reasons. As you know, in Canada, electors get one vote. With a one vote, they have to pick a local guy, a prime minister, a platform, and a policy. It's a very complicated situation for most people. And by the time they get it all figured out, the MP often doesn't know exactly what the mix was. So it becomes very difficult for them to do that. It was easier for me.
Je m'excuse, Lina, tu as eu tes deux questions. Lina, je m'excuse, tu as eu deux questions. Manon, Manon, s'il vous plaît.
That here's some kind of big thing, but Mr. Inky-Mark came out against the policy, the conservative policy concerning the weed board. He's still in caucus.
Yep.
So don't you think that if you are here today, it's because of yourself, your style, that the fact that you stretch the elastic too far?
Possibly. I was very pleased to see Inky-Mark make that statement. I thought that was a great thing. That's the first time I've heard a Conservative member of Parliament have a substantive policy statement in a while that wasn't just out of the government songbook. So I thought that was great that he did that, and I hope he continues to speak out.
But don't you think that MPs have kind of certain margin of maneuver, even if it's not a big one, but it's when you abuse this margin that maybe you end up in the situation you are?
Well, I think by establishing parameters on where a member of Parliament can and cannot speak, and whom he or she cannot speak to, is unreasonable. I believe that a member of Parliament sent here by the electors should be able to talk to whoever they want to talk to, whenever they want to talk, and about anything they want to talk about. I think that is what the electors, that's what the voters expect. And therefore, I think that, if we elect professional men and women and they come together in caucuses because they want to be there, fine. But to have rules imposed upon them, telling them they cannot speak, I think is ridiculous.
Peter Turner.
Mr. Turner, with respect to what you're saying, I think you might have touched on this already from a couple of other questions, but how or why should people not draw the conclusion that this much hyped event here is just Garth talking about Garth?
Well, I'd like to think it's more than that. I would like to think that it is time that we did try and change the system. I think it's time we had more parliamentary reform. I think it's time we had more people who were here in Ottawa and were able to speak their minds. I think it would make politics more representative and more responsive to the individual voters. I really do. And my situation has been an example of one thing that happened, and I've certainly learned a lot from it. I did not believe that there would be no appeal process. I really, maybe I was naive. I've been here before. I've been in the system for a while, but I did not expect that this particular situation would happen. I don't think it's a good thing for democracy, and I'd like to see it prevented in future.
And just to clarify on your intention to say you won't be becoming a Green Party MP now, you say you do plan to run again. Is it possible you would run as a Green Party MP in the next election? Are you ruling that out, or is it still a possibility?
I can't answer that right now because I don't know what that will hold down the road. I'm not ruling anything out at the moment, but I'm very mindful that if I were to become an adherent or a member of another party, that it would have to be consistent with my criticism in the past of people who are floor crossers. And I don't think members of Parliament who are elected as something should cross the floor to become something else. So if I were to do that, I would have to resign and trigger a by-election, or I'd have to do it concurrent with an election being called. I think that would be the only fair way for me to make that move.
Elizabeth Thompson.
Mr. Turner, you made it clear what your views are for the London by-election. Do you have any thoughts on the Repentigny by-election and what you would like to see happen in that particular race?
I don't, and I haven't studied that closely. Obviously, I'm a Federalist, and therefore my predilection is that we have Federalist MPs elected into the House of Commons, but that's would be my only comment.
The follow-up on that is that you talked a lot today about the various principles of democracy and the traditions. One tradition is that senators who are put in cabinet usually are supposed to run at the first opportunity. Repentigny would have been that opportunity for Mr. Fortier. I was wondering what your thoughts are on that.
I regret it. I believe that it would have been the appropriate thing for Mr. Fortier to run in that by-election. Absolutely. And I said that when Mr. Emerson crossed the floor. You know, Mr. Emerson is a great guy, brings a lot to the cabinet and a lot to Canada, but he should have gone back and gotten elected as a Conservative. And Mr. Fortier is the same thing. I believe that he should have stood in that by-election.
I'm sorry, Elizabeth, I have to move on. Do you still have time for 3 journalists who wants to ask a question?
Why do I think he didn't? Because he thought he couldn't win, I would imagine.
So do you guys still have time for 3 more journalists?
For sure.
Okay, so I'm sorry I don't remember your name. The McLeans.
Mr. Turner, just to follow up on some previous questions, everybody knows MPs, everyone around here would know MPs who kind of work quietly through the committee system or through caucus committees and get things done. Isn't the difference between someone like that and you more a matter of temperament than principle? You seem to be standing on principle here, but it seems more like your temperament doesn't allow you to work in that way rather than some underlying fundamental.
Well, now if you're inferring I don't play well with others, I hear you, but I don't believe that the system today really allows that. For example, in the committee system, committees now, the government members on a committee now are told what to do. There is an agenda. Committee members meet before the committee meeting to determine their strategy to support the government. Questions are assigned to committee members to ask to support the government position. And a representative of the minister meets with the government members of that committee to determine what the strategy will be. So there is no role for an independent member of parliament to ask independent questions or pursue an independent agenda. The committee system is gone. In the House of Commons, a government member of parliament may not ask a question in question period unless there is permission from the minister to whom the question is going to be addressed, and it has been approved by the minister. It is not possible for a member of the government caucus to make a statement in the House of Commons, just a 1-minute statement before question period without having been approved and without the script having been approved. These are some fundamental constraints on an individual member of parliament. So if you elect somebody to go to Ottawa and you don't quite understand why they don't ask questions in question period, don't make statements, or don't speak in committee, now you know why. And now I think you know the reason why we need reform.
Brian?
Mr. Turner, how much did you raise and spend to get elected the last time, and how difficult will it be to do that without being able to issue tax receipts?
We raised and spent the maximum amount allowed by Elections Canada in our area was around $90,000. Around 90, yeah. Well, we raised the money, we spent it all. And the election, as you know, was a Metro Toronto area riding, which had not been Conservative for a long time, and it took a large effort to win it. How difficult is it going to be to raise $90,000 in independence? It's going to be tough. No doubt about it. I cannot issue tax receipts until the writ is dropped. That gives me a scant few weeks as an independent in order to raise that money if I'm to issue tax receipts. This is patently unfair. Patently unfair. And it is a reform we need in the Canada Elections Act that will allow independents in order to be on exactly the same level playing field as party members.
And quickly, you talked about the fact that MPs are elected as part of a party and a platform, but you're also saying they need to be more independent. To use another American example, you often hear complaints about moderate Democrats or moderate Republicans being elected to be Republicans or Democrats. Then once they're in, they vote like the other guy. So what's to stop that from happening in the future you envisage in Canada?
Well, there's no control absolutely over that happening. But we just had, a lot of members of the Conservative government who campaigned as MPs against, never taxing seniors' income trusts, and who all just voted for it. Now, there may have been other reasons for that happening, but there are examples abound of where people actually end up, because of party discipline today, having to support positions that they did not support during the election. So somewhere in the middle of that, there's got to be some kind of compromise here that's going to work. It's worth trying to find.
The last question will go to Lina.
Yeah, you said a couple of times you've been here before. So this is the way committees work, the way in caucus the policy is getting down to backbenchers. How different is that from the last time?
I have never seen this before. Last time I was here, I was a chairman of one of the House of Commons committees. We tabled reports that were absolutely counter to what the minister wanted, because it seemed to be the right thing to do, or it was the right policy position. That would be unthinkable right now for a government-controlled committee. When I was here before, I asked questions in question period and didn't get permission. I made statements in the House and did not get permission. I spoke in debates, did not get permission, and I was a member of the government party. Today, all of that is gone. I have found it somewhat shocking, the evolution of the neutering of members of Parliament that I have seen since I left and since I returned. And perhaps that is part of the reason I've reacted the way I have to the situation that I have found here. I have been quite shocked at the situation, at the control of the lack of freedom and the lack of independence of a member of Parliament. We are going in the wrong direction. It's got to stop.
So is this only Stephen Harper's doing, or is it the whole system?
I think all parties are to blame, as I said in my statement. I don't think it's just Mr. Harper. It's not just the Conservative Party. It's all parties. But I think we've reached a new height.
And the last, final one to Manon.
Really short one. It's when you said the independent should be able to emit receipt even before the writ is drawn, then how do you prevent people to declare themselves independent, collect money, emit receipt, and decide at the last minute not to run?
Well,
how can you control that? That's why the writ is there.
Well, a candidate's a candidate, and once a candidate has been selected and has been registered with Elections Candidate, the candidate must have an official agent. The official agent is the one who's responsible for the collecting of the funds, the auditing of the funds, and the reporting of the expenditure of those funds to Election Canada. So it's not possible for an election candidate of any stripe, independent or party, to actually end up taking money. That belongs to the official agent.
They are not registered before the writ.
If you're going to issue tax receipts, then an official agent has to be involved. And once an official agent is involved, then they control the money, not the candidate.
You can still pay your rent.
Sorry?
You can still pay your rent.
Well, it's pretty tightly controlled. Trust me.
Merci beaucoup. C'est ce qui m'a fait à la conférence de presse. Merci.
Thank you all.
We'll see you in December.